Reality Transurfing, Book 4, Ruling Reality, by Vadim Zeland. Section 1, Dancing with Shadows. The Lords of Energy. How strange. It's commonplace and strange at the same time. Cultivated plants and pets were wild a long time ago and existed independently and naturally. But then man woke up and realized that he could bring them under control. Consciousness was what allowed man to rise above animals and plants, and while they were living in an unconscious dream, use them for his own needs. In order to do this, man had to create structures which determined where and how the enslaved species should exist. No matter what the aims of animals and plants were, and undoubtedly these were in place, the order of the structure reduced them to nothing. From the point of view of man, the goal of the lives of living creatures comes down to the primitive needs of feeding and reproduction. However, if this higher being really thinks so, then that is more likely to be evidence of the primitive level of his allegedly perfect mind. In truth, every living creature has its own goal. But why is that so? For what reason? Because the process of attaining one's goal is what drives evolution. Let me repeat that. Because the process of attaining one's goal is what drives evolution. We'll get back to this issue a little later, but for now, let's just state the following fact. The true goal of any living creature, no matter what it is, can only be attained in the creature's natural habitat. Yet any structure subjects the goal of its elements exclusively to its own interests. The development of tamed or ordered animals and plants moves in the direction determined by man. As a result, the elements of the structure fall even deeper asleep and completely lose any notion of their true goals. The life of wild animals and plants is many times richer and more conscious than we think it to be. Take, for example, a herd of wild reindeers. There are more than enough problems, issues related to defending the herd from predators, issues associated with bringing up the new generation, looking for something to eat, family relations, hierarchy, as well as games, and simply enjoying life. The life of a herd of cattle within the structure of a farm is much poorer. Man delivered the animals from a whole range of problems where he started providing them with shelter and food, but in exchange they had to give up their goals to the master. Now he determines how, why, and how long they should live. Wouldn't you agree that this bears much resemblance to a person selling his soul to the devil? And what about man himself? Reality is such that when creating structures, he becomes their slave. Man loses himself and no longer understands who he is and what he wants. This is italicized, so I'm going to repeat it. Man loses himself and no longer understands who he is and what he wants. All his activities are in the end reduced to production, the selling and buying of various products. At the head of any structure, like a superstructure, is a pendulum. Pendulums have no interest in the actual products, yet structures are developing rather actively. Why is that the case? The fact is that the main product is energy. People buy things for their pleasure and comfort, right? Along with the pleasant things, there are also things in life made to give trouble to other people. In both cases, energy is released, positive and negative, and that is what the pendulums are after. As you can see, the production of physical objects and the turnover of goods is far from what it is all about. Energy is the primary goods. That is what is being sold and bought. Let me repeat that. Energy is the primary goods. That is what's being sold and bought. And the whole of this energy market is controlled by pendulums. People get a small part of it, whereas the magnates get the large chunk. Someone gets the hay, someone else gets the milk. There are even operations conducted on the energy market that are quite similar to financial ones. For example, alcohol is energy in its pure form. By drinking alcohol, you take energy on credit. An alcohol-induced rush is when you get your advance of energy. An alcohol-induced rush is when you get your advance of energy, while a hangover is giving it back with interest. You always get to return more than you borrowed. Pendulums never give away energy without profiting from the transaction. Low alcohol drinks make you relaxed. The pendulum sucks your energy little by little. Spirits, in contrast, give you a rush of energy. Let the vodka be drunk. Let the music flow. However, the pendulum leads you this energy at a high interest rate. Soon enough, the trend starts moving in the other direction. Let the vodka flow. Let's get drunk on the music. After the high euphoric feeling comes a very deep low. The more intense the excitement, the more you feel the subsequent depression. A hangover happens not because of a physiological blow to your organs, but mainly because the pendulum is pumping away your free energy. You are then forced either to suffer or consume more alcohol. The pendulum can once again lend you energy since it is not in any hurry. The payback will definitely happen sooner or later. You can run away from the barman without paying your bill, but there is no escaping a pendulum. And the longer you are behind on your payments, the more brutal the payback will be. In this condition, the free energy of the debtor is entirely at the pendulum's disposal. He can sense someone quite literally putting claws into his energy body in the area of the heart chakra. The pendulum sets the condition. Either the drinker consumes more or the torture will continue. To the extent that a person's will is basically his free energy, he becomes weak and weak-willed depending on the amount of energy that has been drawn from him. That is the main cause of alcoholism. If he takes in more, he is once again credited with some energy, but after that, inevitably there comes an even more ruthless payback. His heart may stop, as indeed often happens. The pendulum will leave that man in peace only when there is nothing more to gain from him. And as for whether he'll survive, well, that's just a matter of luck. The first ever credit is the most generous and festive, like a presentation. As you know, the first glass of wine has a rather impressive effect, but later, with every subsequent glass of wine, not only do sensations become duller, but they also become less pleasant. Pendulums fork up only to lure people into their web. Payback is nevertheless always cruel and no one gets any slack. Therefore, if you are taking on this kind of credit, you should always maintain your consciousness at a particularly high level and be aware of your ability to pay back what you have borrowed with interest. Homeless people who have turned into drunks are far from degraded people, as it is the custom to believe. These poor souls simply misjudge their ability to pay back their credit in time, and therefore they are still to this day walking around in debt. They take out more and more loans, and every time the payback only gets tougher. And yet everything began so joyfully as part of holiday cheer. Nobody notices how the process of degradation accelerates, but it inevitably happens nonetheless, and later turns into a snowballing effect. The nature of an induced transfer is very treacherous, and anyone can get pulled into its funnel. Basically, everything that is related to intense, that is, energy-consuming feelings, has to do with bad habits. And it's all due to the credits handed out by pendulums. Why are they bad for you? Because pendulums are aggressive by nature and are prone to increasing conflict energy. Everything that is appealing but is bad for you will sooner or later come to a bad end. The greater the harm, the more negative energy is realized. Positive energy is never released in such large quantities. The greatest energy yields are harvested from those who use drugs. The short-lived euphoria is nothing in comparison to the subsequent depression. And if another dose doesn't arrive in time, a horrible withdrawal pumps out all the remaining energy of the poor bugger to the very last drop. There are also other kinds of credits with a lower interest rate. These are mainly tobacco, tea, coffee, alcohol-free beverages, chewing gum. At this point, someone may not be able to hold back and will say, "For pity's sakes, what's chewing gum got to do with it?" As I already mentioned, when any material but also moral need is satisfied, energy is released. It may be the energy of pleasure, comfort, or whatever else, it doesn't matter. In any case, when you want something, energy is accumulated. When you get what you want, you emit energy. In the process of chewing, a person gets a certain sense of comfort, which, by the way, has very ancient roots. The nature of this comfort is quite obvious. When you are eating, everything is fine, but when you are the one being eaten, frankly, it sucks. In the end, the same goes for any habit. If becomes a regular client, he becomes part of the flock. There is no need for a sheep pen. The client won't be going anywhere anyway, as long as his attention is held in a pendulum's noose of capture. When that person thinks about the object of his habit, he emits energy on a pendulum's resonance frequency. All the thoughts of energy-owing debtors, for example, are directed exclusively at getting another portion of energy, another loan. They are unable to think about anything else because the pendulum is holding on to their attention. Such a capture is possible thanks to a particular feature of the human mind. Attention can be fixated on just one thing. It's like the arrow on a weather vane, with the pendulum driving the wind in one and the same direction. The way the attention arrow gets captured can be illustrated by a very simple example. When a persistent tune gets stuck in your head. One shouldn't assume that dependence develops only because of physiological factors. They too are present, but they play a far less significant role. For example, when the most invertebrate smokers go away on a submarine, they are not burdened in any way by a lack of opportunity to smoke. As soon as the manhole is battened down and there's been an order to dive, thoughts about smoking vanish altogether, because objectively there is absolutely no possibility of smoking. The smoker has completely come to terms with this objective need and doesn't give it another thought. The vein of his attention has turned in another direction. Where did the physiological dependence go? But then the submarine comes back from its voyage, and if the smoker didn't intend to quit smoking, he remembers that it would be nice to have a cigarette, and the persistent creditor immediately captures his arrow of attention into its noose. The capture of the arrow of attention is also confirmed by such a phenomenon as gaming or internet addiction. There is a large group of people who have gone so far that they only feel comfortable in front of a computer screen. Should a person addicted in this way tear himself away from the screen even for a couple of hours, he gets a temporary break with all the signs of withdrawal. His head and muscles start to ache and there is an unbearable sense of discomfort. But as soon as the client goes back to the screen, all symptoms immediately disappear. Clearly, there is no physiological need in this case. In all cases, dependence takes place mainly because the arrow of attention gets caught in the pendulum's noose of capture. In order to come off the needle, you have to switch your attention. Occupy it with something else. Let me repeat this. In order to come off the needle, you have to switch your attention. Occupy it with something else. To break free from the noose of capture using only willpower is hardly possible, just as you can only get rid of an annoying tune stuck in your head by switching over to another one. A bad habit is usually followed by a set scenario and scenery. All this creates a characteristic environment, for example, a smoking break at work, which facilitates the capture of attention. There is only one way to pay back all your loans and leave this vicious bank: to change the scenario and the scenery. It is not difficult to do. You need only a desire to do so and a little imagination. In any case, without even having a loan, but merely through using the products of civilization, human beings give away a part of their energy to pendulums in spite of themselves. People are literally being shepherded, if not to say cultivated. The entire lifespan of civilized society is a never-ending process of consuming and giving away energy. And this whole energy exchange is controlled by pendulums. But the gathering of energy from people is not too bad on its own. The main danger posed by the structure is the reduction to nothing of the individual paths of its elements. A member of the structure even loses sight of the very idea that his own path exists somewhere. He starts not only doing what the structure tells him to, but even wanting the things that would benefit the structure. So don't be under the delusion that man is an intelligent being and will therefore not allow his own enslavement. As I have already mentioned, this level of awareness of human beings is at a low level, while the structure slowly but safely leads them towards the further decline of their last remnants of awareness. For a complete victory of the structure, it needs to unite all elements into one single information space, a process that is happening right now, and quite rapidly and successfully at that. Perhaps man has only a very few bricks remaining before he bricks himself up completely. What can be done? After all, it turns out that if you consume the products of civilization, you are being shepherded. We can say that without question marks now. There have been occasions when people have tried to run away from civilization and settle in communities in the wild. I won't be the judge of how successful their attempts were, but it seems that human beings are unable to completely reject civilization. They are not fit for a life outside civilization. Nevertheless, it would make sense to reduce all harmful products to a minimum and replace them with organic gifts from nature. For example, set up a patrimony with your own fruit and vegetable garden. The main advantage of such an oasis of animate nature in the desert of civilization is that its owner, not a structure of some kind, is the one who sets the norms and standards. But it really isn't necessary for those who don't like digging vegetable patches to do so. Everyone gets to have the ability to set the laws of their own existence on their own. If I want, I'll asphalt the whole thing, or have the garden run wild and untamed. For a city person, another way may entail switching to a diet consisting only of natural products. But even in this case, you first need to wake up and become aware of the fact that a pretty apple grown within the structure and bought in the supermarket is by its features only suitable for a fully fledged element of that structure, with a complete set of illnesses that are brought about by such a diet. Basically, there are a lot of different ways, and everyone can choose the one most suitable for them. For me, the role model will always be one particular feral cat with whom I had the honor of making an acquaintance. My friend and I used to like going out to the forest for a tasty barbecue in order to get a break from the benefits of civilization. One day, attracted by interesting smells, a huge cat came up close to our camp. Apparently, he had been a pet a long time ago, but then, for some unknown reason, had found himself in the forest, where he turned wild. Judging by his size, this bushy blockhead was a successful hunter of little birds and mice, although an enormous cat like him could have easily taken down a rabbit. He did not decline our treats, but accepted them without further ado. He simply grabbed and ran. Since then, we had the pleasure of meeting him several times in the same forest. This whiskered fellow liked helping himself to treats, but didn't allow us to get too familiar with him. Indeed, this cat was a true transurfer. He had got to know the taste of real freedom, and even though he didn't mind having to deal with civilization now and then, he would never trade his independence for any comforts. You can still use civilization's goods without developing dependence on them. Awareness distinguishes a free individual from the flock. You just have to wake up and become aware of what is going on around you. As for me, I managed to find out about all this and pass it on to you, only because, well, actually it's a secret, but I will tell you, dear reader, I went wild. I ran away from the farm. End segment.